Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the Sporting Edge with Greg H. Want to just talk a little bit about patience and patience in sport. Chatted about process, which remains a constant for me. That process is a never-ending conversation, and I'm sure that many of you have heard the phrase "patience is a virtue," and certainly, whilst I'll lack patience in many areas, I can certainly vouch that when it comes time to building a sporting system, and all the pieces of the puzzle that have to come into what that looks like, patience is absolutely essential and necessary, and is very fundamental to building a sustainable team environment. Now, part of process means that you're focusing on the incremental steps that need to be taken to obtain what potentially could be about success, and how you measure success is still a discussion for another session. But simply focusing on a winning team, in other words, that winning is the only measurement that you have for success, I believe fundamentally, particularly from an educational perspective, that is, although valid, nobody plays sport to lose. I've always said that nobody plays sport to lose. And if you do play sport to lose, then in particular, if you're playing competitive sport, if you play to lose, then I'm not too sure why you do it, but each to their own. And we look at various coaches from around the world, and people that understand sport often ask the question, why is it always just the head coach that gets fired when results aren't up to scratch? What about the captain of the team? What about players? What about administrators that have hired that person into that job? And a lot of the time, particularly with sports that have, excuse me, sporting codes that have World Cups or World Championships, you'll see a cycle between those tournaments. So soccer and rugby union, rugby league, netball, cricket. There's a cycle of coaches that generally you'd see an exodus at some other point. If you fail at a World Cup, generally you get fired or your contract's up, and you move on. Now, at the school level, at the club level, the coach sort of has space to move. In fact, doesn't well, has space to move, but doesn't really have regular enough access and fast enough access to players to build this team quicker. And so, at a school and in a club space, there has to be a far greater amount of patience. Professional sport, it's a job for these players. They're available 8 hours, 10 hours, full time, in the gym, in the nutrition, in the psychologist, on the field, with skills, without, whatever the case may be. And so one of the phrases that I've used in terms of building will be progressive selection. And the way I understand this, it means giving fresh-minded youngsters a chance. Okay. However, it's not what a coach. It's most coaches would be giving youngsters a chance. Okay, but do you ask yourself as a coach, would you give a youngster a chance at the expense of a W? All right. So would you select someone progressively, understanding that in a year's time, 2 years' time, 3 years' time, they're going to be of value to your setup? Would you do that? Would you take what I would perceive a question for a coach is, would you risk that? I don't think there's too many coaches that I know that would take that risk. But if we don't take the risk as coaches of sporting teams, how then do we build? We can build by sort of a staggered approach, some new, some old, some in between, and that's fine. But there's going to be a time when you have in front of you the concept of a progressive selection, a time when the imbalance, you're going to have to understand, am I prepared to take this risk for the sake of building the team? Do I have the patience? Will the public have the patience? Will the team members have the patience to carry and build this process so that we can start to get our puzzle looking whole? So building a team firstly has to be about building good people that are respectful of themselves, respectful of the team process, respectful of each other. And and respectful of the fact that there is process. So if you can get the group that you're involved with to buy into the fact that patience is part of the process, and the process in itself will take us to a place that you've got buy-in from your team members, that patience is absolutely fundamental. Good start. An individual, as mentioned previously, is there's a strong relation related to culture, and culture talks about an environment where there's comfort for individuals to have very well developed self-esteems and very high levels of self-awareness. And certainly where those two entities come into it, there will be value added. There's no question about it. So if you can start by dealing with the individual, the person, building good people with good self-awareness and good self-esteem, you will then have somebody that is aware about the team environment, but also aware about themselves and how those two can interlink and obviously add value. From there, you build the pieces, you mold the pieces into a happy, motivated, inspiring unit. It's not difficult, but it takes time. It takes patience, and coaches generally understand patience. It's other people that need convincing. It's school principals. It's heads of sport. It's outside of that, it's club chairman, club president, club committees. Above that, it's sporting federation or sporting code CEOs, committee or board chairmen or presidents. They're the ones who need convincing. And as you can quite blatantly see, for the most part, patience is not really something that's very prevalent outside of the coaching circle. So for me, once I've got a happy, motivated, inspired unit that is in fact inspiring other units, from this point I would then look to group effective units together. These potentially could be groups that are working to deliver on the field or on the court, whatever code you're involved in. Talk about scenarios that take place in performance, how it was reacted to, how it was dealt with in that scenario. And it's good for players, coaches, and other coaches to talk to coaches of other codes, particularly in a school environment where you've got, some have got 5 codes, some have got 10, some have got up to 20, 25 codes of sport. Get coaches talking to each other cross code to try and understand how to deal with individuals, how to build great people, how to share scenarios and work off real time, real life events and how they've been solved and dealt with. So if you can get to a scenario sharing from an effective unit, from an inspiring group, the scenario sharing creates an interdependence, not necessarily dependence at the expense of oneself, but an interconnection that is exceptional and very much can start the process of peer accountability. In other words, holding the team members, holding themselves to account with each other. In other words, coming late to training, not listening, fumbling, whatever the case may be, that there's a peer accountability, which is a two-way street, and I can mention more about that. And the peer accountability is one of the ways that we address whether or not, I believe anyway, whether or not there is in fact honesty in the group. Because peer accountability is quite simply one player or one coach telling another player or another coach where they think they haven't met the team guidelines or the team principles or the team values, or where they could potentially get better. Now, saying that is not the hard part. Receiving it and listening to it as an individual, that's the hard part. So can you really say that you have honesty in your group when in fact you're not in a position to accept that messaging properly? And until you have that, can you really say that there's honesty in a unit, that there's been patience in building a team unit? Maybe not, I don't think. But that is very, very important. So from what I've said, you should be able to understand that you would work from the smallest possible denominator, the smallest group, the smallest number, even if it's just one person, and you build from there. So it's a bottom-up approach. You're building just like you build a house, the good old analogy, but you build slowly, okay? And that's part of the process, part of the patience. Now, building bottom-up takes it from the smallest. You build the whole group in a decided time frame. It may be strategic. The strategy should be flexible and dynamic and should be adaptable and agile to move around with what the current circumstances bring. But in the process, patience is absolutely essential. So we can't use patience as an excuse for deviating from timelines. Patience does not lend itself to mediocrity. Patience is not mediocrity. Patience is excellence. But meeting deadlines is also part of being excellent, and being accountable is part of being excellent. And being accountable to this process is exceptionally key, should I say. So in training sessions or in competition, feedback is going to be a very important part of this process and a very important part of guiding how patient we need to be. And that's going to be, how patient do I need to be with the individual in building from the smallest unit to the biggest unit, right? You've got to know your individuals. Some people you can go hard at, some people you can't go that hard. You've got to know exactly who you're dealing with. So understanding the process, how much patience is required with individuals will undoubtedly influence the output you get from your players or from fellow coaches or from colleagues. Some get it quicker than others. It's just the way of the world. And your job as a sporting coach is going to be to know how to accurately and patiently manage each of your assistant coaches, your colleague coaches, your players, how to manage them individually, patiently into getting to their best. Because when you have everybody getting to their best, then you will have a successful team unit. And I believe that in patience, in process, in building a team, building good people makes good teams. Very seldom do I see it the other way around. It's not impossible that it happens the other way around, but generally building good people generally influences a good team. And a good team can happen at any time, right? Any time. A great team takes plenty of time. A good team can happen anytime. A great team takes plenty of time. And patience is a virtue. And whilst the other P's of performance remain essential, proper planning prevents poor performance, I would certainly add patient, proper planning prevents poor performance. So that P is always in there. And you could say process-driven, patient planning. Okay? It's a very, very important addition to some of the thought processes that coaches sort of go about. And it's not an easy job, but it is very possible. As always, please reach out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. It'd be lovely to catch up and just hear back from you. But ultimately, stay at the edge of sport. It's always good to put these sessions together. And I welcome all feedback and look forward to catching